Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome back to this week's episode of Podiatry Marketing. With me, as usual, every week, my partner in crime, my friend, can't think of another word, but it is Big Jim Mack. How you doing today, Jim?
Tyson, I'm doing well. Hopefully, the tariffs that my country or my former country, I don't know how I want to refer to the U.S. as right now, but hopefully the price of your goods and things in Australia aren't hiking up too high these days.
Well, I'm not going to comment because I'm planning on going to the States twice this year, and and I don't want to say anything that border security could hold against me. When I want to go back when I want to go into the country, all of a sudden
Sure.
they've gone, oh, hang on, we saw you did a podcast and had 50,000 people listen to you bag Trump. So,
All right, we'll move away from that topic and maybe just stick to podiatry marketing today.
yeah, it might be easier. So, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so obviously we kind of moved from winter into spring, at least in the northern hemisphere, and I think it's a good time to kind of reconsider kind of community connections. It's warming up around here. People can get outside and do things. We've talked about it a bit in the past, but kind of having a strategy when it comes to how can you engage with your local community is really really important. And since it's springtime here in the northern hemisphere, I think it's good just to go over some basics again, but just what are some ways that you can market your practice to your local community? We've talked in the past about on your website having areas we serve pages and making sure that search is working locally. But what are those things you can do physically where your practices are located at to kind of build your authority, to gain the trust of people in your local area, and hopefully drive more patients to your practice.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because you talk about the northern hemisphere moving from your winter into spring. We're in the southern hemisphere, but where I'm in Cairns, because it's quite hot, we're moving into autumn, which means things are cooling down. But a lot of different sports are kicking off now because
Sure.
that's when they actually peak. So but what you're about to talk about applies to us, even though we're actually in reverse.
That's good. That's good. I'm trying to make it as relevant for all of our listeners as possible.
Yeah, except the UK. It's just wet.
Just wet and cold there all year long.
I don't, I don't know, but they, it always seems to be wet. Except when I was there, I had fantastic weather.
There
Anyway,
you go.
so okay, what's the first point?
Yes, the first point is there's an opportunity to kind of to sponsor local events and local initiatives. I think whether it's a community sports team, it's festivals, it's charity runs. There's always different community groups that could benefit from some sponsorship, and then obviously by kind of tying your clinic to that organization or to those events, you're going to get some visibility. And I think, like we talked about in the past, if you have a specific niche, maybe you want to take care of diabetics and diabetic wounds, so maybe the American Diabetes has some walks and stuff that might make sense for your practice, or you're wanting to get into sports medicine. Maybe there's a local 5K or a triathlon or a marathon where you can kind of get on the banner. Maybe it's kind of in combination with some volunteering as well. But I think there are a lot of opportunities to really kind of get out into the public and kind of brand yourself kind of into the niche and show that you are an important part of the community. Because as much as we just like to sit back and let the patients flow into our practice, people need to know we exist, and they're probably going to have a lot more goodwill for someone that's out there spending a bit of money, helping sponsor things that are helpful to kind of build the culture and community kind of in your local area there.
Yeah, I find it funny with some people when they say, "Oh, I want to get more involved in sports podiatry." And when you talk to them, I go, so what events do you get involved with in your community? None. They sit on their fat bums and they do nothing, and then they wonder why they're not actually building up a reputation for that area. So I know my clinic, we sponsored the local netball. We sponsored a local basketball team. We were also the podiatrist for the national basketball team, but that came about because we were sponsoring the local clubs beforehand. We were sponsors for the local triathlon clubs. When there were fun runs on, we were involved in those things. And long term, that was how we built a reputation. I think you need to be out there. And I remember having a conversation with Simon Bartold once, and he said he did so much volunteer work for almost a decade before he ever made any money from sports podiatry.
Absolutely, there's a huge opportunity there. There's a huge need for that for our expertise. Just kind of being physically present and kind of sponsoring some of these events. I think that's also important to know there can be carryover to the digital world as well. If you sponsor a team or an event, they're most likely going to have a website, and maybe it's going to be featured in a newspaper, or it could be featured on that newspaper's website or multiple newspapers' website that your clinic, and then they might link back to your clinic in those different web pages, and that can be really, really important because one of the ways that your clinic is going to be more visible is not necessarily just kind of shouting into the void, creating content. Yeah, there's certain things you can do on Google Business Profile, and there's things you can do on your clinic website. But one thing that Google really values, and probably these kind of upcoming AI LLMs like ChatGPT will value, is that if people are linking to your website from reputable websites, it's a huge signal to Google that you are, number one, you're local, right? If you're
Mm.
sponsoring local teams or local events, then they'll know that you're kind of in that area. So that's helpful. But then the more good links you have coming into your website, the higher you're going to rank for different types of search terms and for different local terms. So while it is about being out there, maybe it's your brand that's physically out there, or you're out there, helping at these events, it can really kind of strengthen your online presence as well.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, you will end up in the media when you attend enough of these events. But even when you go, is make sure you have another team member with you, or someone that can be taking photos as you're doing stuff. And even if you're only using that on your own website and in your own social media pages, it still lets the community know, hey, look at us. We actually like being involved in the community. And I'll guarantee you, every time you're involved, you will also not only you get patients from that event, but existing patients see you there. And it shows that you actually yeah, you give a rat's.
Yeah, you're just not sitting back in your office, just like I said, just kind of hanging out, just waiting for stuff to come, and you're actively showing people that you care about what goes on in the community. I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, and it's even like the shirt I'm wearing at the moment, the push-up challenge. That's a national thing in Australia about doing so many push-ups in a certain period of time, and the amount of push-ups you do, it's related to how many men have committed suicide. So it's a mental health thing. And but even just being involved in that, if you're involved in it and your podiatry clinic's involved in it, and you've all got T-shirts to say you're involved with the push-up challenge, then that's also one of those things that just shows that, okay, that might be outside of your community, but I'll guarantee there's a lot of people in your community that are also involved in those type of charity events.
No, absolutely. It's a huge win-win. You're helping them, but they're also, you're kind of being associated with helping out the community.
Yeah, and I tell you, when you do 2,500 push-ups in a very short period of time, you know you've done them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's next?
So next is kind of hosting educational workshops or health screenings at your practice. I think one of the people that I've seen do this with great success is Rob Cananello from New Jersey. Having people into your clinic for these free workshops or health screenings helps you kind of show off your expertise. Shows off the professionalism and kind of builds trust people, and kind of a low, it's a low risk for them to come in, and I've seen him do it with different running groups, having kind of a injury clinic into his clinic, into his practice, so they can kind of see what it's like in his clinic. But he can also provide them value as far as helping kind of, give them things to look for as far as training for marathons or the different runs. It can be a really important thing, like I said, to kind of show that you're knowledgeable, and to show that you're willing to care and kind of bring people into the clinic. I think it really provides, valuable information and potentially services. If you're doing a workshop, that's great, just to kind of educate people. But, maybe, as far as if there's need in your local area, doing some free foot screenings, in your practice is something that you can consider. Or maybe if there's a community center or somewhere else in your town, it's a great way to kind of give back to your local community. And like I said, there's going to be other healthcare providers as well. They'll probably have something similar, especially in these free screenings and healthcare screenings and such. But along with having community groups come into your clinic, you could also organize something where you're bringing other healthcare providers into your clinic, whether it be physios or physical therapists, other sports medicine doctors, other people you think would be helpful to have referrals. Having kind of maybe an on-site workshop to let them know what you do. It could be something that could lead to additional referrals, and kind of trust in your clinic and what you're doing there.
Yeah, well, in our clinic, we used to, beginning of each football season, we would write to all the coaches and managers of all the different clubs at all levels, all the grades. And we'd say, on these 2 Saturday mornings, you can come in at any time you want during these times, and we will do free screenings on any particular concerns or injuries that you have. That always went really well, especially with junior football or soccer. But I was in Christchurch many years ago. There was a podiatry clinic there, and they used to have a set time. It was like 3:30 to 5:30 on certain afternoons, and that was their free injury screening clinic. And anyone could just rock in with any problem, lower limb related, and just turn up at the clinic and just to get an idea, is this something they need to worry about? Can you show me how to strap this? And they did really, really well from it.
No, absolutely. It's a huge opportunity. I think it kind of lowers that barrier, right? Some people, at least in the US and other places, are so concerned about the cost of healthcare,
Mm.
and just to get some advice, is or just a screening to kind of understand what's going on. And it doesn't have to be something that's long or like super involved, but it can kind of give some people some peace of mind and build trust with you in your clinic. So there definitely is some value there.
What I find really funny about the first point that you spoke about, and even just this one, I recall 20 something years ago, they organized a bit of a health talk at one of the primary schools. It was where my daughter was going to school. So I came along and spoke about lower limb problems. There was a chiropractor that was there talking about chiropractic, and there was a physiotherapist talking about physiotherapy, dietitian as well. I look at all of us who were there 20 something years ago and where we all are now, and every single one of us that were there at the time when our clinics were nothing ended up having really probably the best clinics in each of those professions in town. So I think there's a correlation between getting off your bum and actually putting in the hard yards, not expecting a return, but long term there will be a return. If you keep giving, you will get it back later on.
No, absolutely. Being generous with your time and your expertise definitely can, it comes back to you. It's kind of karma, right? Like if you don't expect anything, but you just keep on giving, then at some point in time, it's going to turn in your favor, I think.
It's like this podcast. Ah, geez, you can't wipe a smile off your face, Jim. You're thinking, yeah, we're giving, and we're giving.
Well, and we've gotten some clients from this and met some nice people along the way. So
We have actually. I met a few over in the UK, and a couple that sent you a message as well. And I must admit, like we've done this podcast. I've done Podiatry Legends, and we've given so much of ourselves putting it together. But I will admit, we do get a lot back from it. When anyone
Absolutely.
comes up and says, "Oh, I listened to this episode, and you and Jim laughed about that," it actually puts a really big smile on my face.
Yeah, it's a fun endeavor for sure.
Because we know that, hopefully, I always look at it this way. If you just help one person just do something that they didn't think they were capable of doing after they listened to one of these episodes, then I don't think you can put a price on that.
No, couldn't agree more.
Okay, what's the next point?
The next is maybe a topic we've touched on a bit in the past, but it's collaborating with local businesses and organizations. When you form partnerships with other local businesses or nonprofits, maybe it's joint events or it's cross promotion, you can kind of really expand within the kind of the community itself, but also into the niche you want to. Like this is the example of going out and giving your time at maybe a local running shoe store, kind of spending time with some physios or some physical therapists to understand what they're doing, and showing an interest in their practice and kind of building these kind of reciprocal relationships. Maybe it's a health club, having a foot screening or doing something like that, but getting out into these local businesses and just providing value for these potential partnerships. These collaborations can really introduce you to new audiences. If maybe you hadn't really considered, giving talks at local running groups or triathlon groups, like you mentioned, Tyson, but you can get you in front of people that maybe didn't know you exist, and by being visible to them now, you become kind of an option for them when they're having kind of foot and ankle related issues. So, creating these these relationships with other businesses, other organizations, your local community, can really pay off dividends.
Yeah, well, we even did a talk with we would write to some of the larger accounting firms, and because they had to spend a certain amount of money on work health and safety, that was just part of their budget for their business, had to go into that. I don't know if it was a government regulation or not. And so we would go in there once a year and we would do like a 45-minute presentation just about foot-related injuries in the workplace based on the footwear we knew that they would be wearing in an accounting firm, especially the females. And it was surprising the positive feedback we got from that, where some people just go, wow, I had no idea that this was related to my shoes. And yeah, and we actually got a lot of patients. So plus we got paid to do it. Well, I was going to do it for free, and they paid us $250 to come and do this 45-minute talk. Well, I'm going to say no to that.
No, absolutely. I think it's great that you got paid. And it's also one of those things like you said, they don't know you exist, or they're not aware of the type of expertise or knowledge that you have. It kind of not only will that kind of inform that specific person that was at that event, right? But then they've got family, they've got potentially have kids, they have neighbors and friends that are going to have some kind of foot related issue. I'm still surprised every time I'm at one of my kids' soccer games, or I'm out doing something and someone starts talking about their heel pain or the foot issue they've had. So, and while I'm no longer a licensed clinical podiatrist to treat anybody, the amount of questions I get from friends and family members and people in my network is astounding. So when people know that you exist, you become an option for them, and have them into your practice. It can really exponentially grow what you're trying to do there.
Yeah, and it was like I was saying before, we did that health talk at the school. The physio, the dietitian, the chiropractor. After we did that, we sort of knew each other, but we knew each other even better after that day because we actually listened to each other's talks. Then we're talking afterwards. And actually the chiropractor that was there that day, I actually saw him today for treatment.
There you go.
So maintain that relationship 20-something years later.
That's cool.
What's next?
So next I would say is the topic you touch on real briefly, and it kind of blends into some of the ones we've talked about already tonight. But, it's really about encouraging not just yourself to go and volunteer, but also your team and your clinic to kind of come out with you. I think there's
but will I get paid overtime?
I think there's benefits beyond for financial compensation. I think sometimes there can be a team building opportunity. Maybe there's a lunch you guys go out afterwards to kind of thank them for their volunteering. But when you motivate your staff to participate in these activities, they get to see, the impact that you can make and they can make beyond just the clinic itself, right? You're probably going to see Mrs. Jones, who's running a 5K or did the diabetes walk that was in the practice. And now you got to see them out in the real world and see how thankful they are. Sometimes the payment is the smiles on the people's faces, or the amount of, getting them back to doing their activities and something that they didn't think they were going to be able to do. This not only could this kind of contribute positively to the community, obviously, if you're volunteering at a race walk or doing foot checks and making sure that, people are okay, but it's also, I think it can help boost team morale, right? Like I said, they get out in the community, they can kind of see some of the positive effects that they're having an impact on along, as a member of your team. It can really showcase your practice's dedication to kind of be a part of that community. And, there's kind of strength in numbers, right? So if just you and one other person from your team that are out there, it's going to feel kind of rinky dinky. And I mean, it's better to be there than not be there. But if you have your entire team out there, maybe it's once a year or twice a year, it doesn't have to be every month, right? We're not expecting those folks to do those things. But like I said, tying it into a team lunch afterwards, making it a kind of a fun day, in more ways can be really helpful. But I think it's an opportunity for team building and to kind of boost those kind of connections between team members, because maybe, they see each other at work and they don't have many connections outside of work. It's another chance to kind of build those bonds to really help streamline and build a trusting relationships within your own team.
Yeah. And I think it also comes back to when you're employing people, is you're looking for people, when you're looking through their past resume or places they've worked before, if you really want there to be some great community involvement, you want to do things as a team, is make that part of the interview process, is get them to tell you things that they've done in the past, where they've previously worked and how they've been involved in their team or been involved in community events and volunteered at different things. Because if you get someone who's just a selfish bastard, And then you employ them because you're super desperate because you need a podiatrist or whoever in your business, and then you want them to volunteer. They go, oh, what, am I getting paid extra for this? As soon as you get that comment, you don't have a team player.
Right.
So I think it's really important right from the beginning is to select that right person and talk about this whole volunteering community service. Look for evidence that they've done it before, and then I think you'll get more buy-in. I think chiropractors do it better than anybody. You go to a chiropractor and the receptionist is always like drinking the Kool-Aid. Oh, the doctor will be with you soon. They're they are so invested in the chiropractor.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I went off track a little bit there, but anyway, what's the next one?
Yeah, so we'll wrap up. Kind of like we talked about it previously. You brought it up is that these different community activities, whether it be you're sponsoring a team or you're doing a volunteer event, make sure you have someone taking photos and videos of that because showing that community. It's great that you're involved in the community, but you want to make sure that it's visible to others, right? So what you want to do is get it on your website, having good photos there. Maybe it's on your social media channels, something to put into your newsletter. You really want to create kind of dedicated content, whether it's a section on the website or just occasionally on social media. Maybe it's blog posts. You can kind of have recaps of those events. What are some upcoming things you're doing as well? There's a way to kind of build in that type of content that shows this continuous kind of involvement in the community. And the more people that see or engage with the community, the more likely they are to be, excited and come in and see you because they know that you're not just kind of like I said, you're an active part of the community. You're kind of putting goodwill out there. And when you do that, it's going to come back to you. So when you demonstrate this kind of commitment to the community and kind of show it, on your different digital channels, it's going to make patients want to participate more and come and see you more because they know that you have the best interest of them and your local community in mind.
Yeah, I think this part of marketing that you're talking about here is really that long-term marketing. And I know a lot of people, I see it on Facebook all the time. I was going to shoot a video on this topic as well, but they'll post something into a Facebook group and go, I've just set up a new business. It's been going now for 12 months. I was getting a lot of patients at the beginning and now it's really slowed down. Has anyone got some marketing advice for me? And I'm like, and I just, and then people give them tips. And a lot of the time, some of the tips they're given, there's nothing wrong with the advice that they give them,
Sure.
but it's so superficial. It's so, I'll do this. And I'm like, okay, you'll get a couple of patients from that. I'll do this. Oh, you'll get a couple of patients from that. But what we're talking about here is this is the long-term good stuff that if you do this right and you put these strategies into place and you let the community know that you are part of the community, you're here to help, the community will look after you long-term. No matter what's happening, forget about what platform is the most popular at the moment. The community don't care. They will look after you if you put this work in.
No, absolutely. I think it's about building that positive momentum, the positive kind of trust and reliability from the community that really makes it's not a short-term play, right? It's something that building relationships, you have to be, honest. You have to kind of really, if you're trying to build a practice for the long term, these long-term tactics or strategies, or just kind of just being a good person can really go a long way. Just making sure you do things on a consistent basis for the best of not only of your practice, but for the community itself.
Okay. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think we're good there.
Okay, Big Jim. I will talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
Okay. See you. Bye.
Bye now.